She collapsed outside the trauma bay, bleeding onto a floor polished for inspections, while the most trusted Army doctor in Arizona stood over her with a gun. But the real question is not why he pulled the trigger. It is what he was so desperate to bury. Inside Red Mesa Joint Medical Center, wounded soldiers came looking for healing, prosthetics, surgeries, therapy, a second chance at life. On paper, everything looked perfect. Supplies were stocked, treatments were completed, patients were served. But trauma nurse Avery Knox saw what the records tried to hide: a missing kit, a fake signature, a soldier still waiting for a leg the system claimed she already received. This story is about courage inside silence, corruption behind medals, and the terrible price of asking one more question. Watch until the end, because the gunshot was only the loudest part of the crime. Like this video and comment where you're watching from. The gunshot was only the sound people remembered later. The truth had begun much earlier in quieter places under softer lights where no one thought to look for blood. Red Mesa Joint Medical Center rose out of the Tucson desert like a promise made in steel and glass. At sunrise, the building caught the copper light from the mountains and threw it back across the parking lots, the ambulance bays, and the long rows of flagpoles that snapped in the dry Arizona wind. Helicopters from nearby military installations crossed the sky in low, steady patterns. Their shadows passed over the roof, over the emergency entrance, over the families waiting outside with paper coffee cups and unread discharge forms folded in their hands. Above the main entrance, carved into brushed metal, were 3 words every patient saw before they stepped through the sliding doors: duty, healing, honor. Avery Knox had read those words thousands of times. She had walked beneath them before dawn, after midnight, in summer heat that shimmered off the pavement, and in winter rain that turned the desert dust into red mud. She had passed them on days when soldiers came home alive, and on days when mothers arrived too late to say goodbye. She never touched the letters. She never paused in front of them. But every time she entered the hospital, some small part of her answered them. Duty was simple. Healing was harder. Honor depended on who was keeping count. Avery was 38, though the years in trauma medicine had given her the stillness of someone older. She had dark hair, usually pinned too tightly at the back of her head, steady brown eyes, and a voice that stayed calm even when the room was coming apart. New nurses sometimes mistook her quiet for distance. New doctors sometimes mistook it for obedience. They usually learned better. Before, Red Mesa Avery had served as an Air Force flight nurse. She had worked inside aircraft that shook so hard her teeth ached. She had held pressure on wounds while engines roared, while radios cracked, while medics shouted over rotor wash and dust. She had learned that panic had a smell. She had learned that a man could be joking one second and dying the next. She had learned to read the small things before the large things arrived. The way a hand trembled before the blood pressure dropped. The way a patient stared past you when pain moved from the body into the soul. The way a room went silent when everyone inside it knew the same thing, but no one wanted to say it. At Red Mesa, the war was supposed to be behind the doors, contained in medical charts and memory. But trauma had a way of following people home. On the night everything first shifted, Avery was 12 hours into a shift that should have ended at 7. A dust storm had rolled across Interstate 10 before sunset, turning the highway into a river of brake lights and twisted metal. The civilian emergency rooms nearby were overloaded. Red Mesa took overflow trauma when the county system buckled, and by midnight the bays were full. Avery had not eaten since noon. Her coffee sat cold beside the medication scanner. She was changing gloves when the trauma phone rang. The charge nurse lifted the receiver, listened for 6 seconds, then looked at Avery. Military transport coming in. Male, mid-20s. Crush injury. Possible femoral bleed. 5 minutes out. Avery pulled a fresh gown from the cart. Trauma 3. The room changed at once. Nurses moved in practiced arcs. A respiratory therapist checked the airway setup. Liam Carter, a young Navy corpsman assigned to the trauma wing, opened drawers and counted supplies under his breath. He was 24, with wide shoulders and a face that still gave away too much. He had been at Red Mesa for only 4 months. He tried hard not to look nervous, which made him look nervous all the time. Avery caught him checking the same drawer twice. "Slow is smooth," she said. Liam swallowed. "Ooh, this fast?" That is the idea. The ambulance doors burst open 3 minutes later. Corporal Nolan Briggs came in on a stretcher under a sheet already soaked through at the thigh. His boots were still on. His face was gray beneath the desert dirt. His lips cracked, his jaw clenched around pain he no longer had the strength to speak. "Training rollover outside Yuma," the medic said, walking fast beside the stretcher. "Pinned under a vehicle. We got a tourniquet high right thigh. Lost a lot before we reached him. Pressure dropped twice in transport." Avery's hands were already moving. On 3123. They transferred him to the trauma bed. The room filled with sound. Monitor leads snapping into place. Scissors cutting fabric. Suction starting. Blood pressure cycling. Someone calling out numbers, someone else repeating them louder. Nolan Avery said, leaning over him. "My name is Avery. You are at Red Mesa. We have you." His eyes flickered. "My leg," he whispered. "We are working on it." Blood pulsed beneath the dressing at his upper thigh. Avery looked at Liam. "Vascular shunt kit." Liam turned to the supply cabinet. Avery watched him from the corner of her eye as she tightened pressure over the wound. He opened the top drawer, then the second. Then he moved to the backup cabinet near the wall. His shoulders stiffened. Avery felt it before he spoke. "It is not here." She looked up. "Check the trauma cart." "I did." "Check again." Liam moved too fast now. Plastic bins slid open. Wrappers shifted. His breathing grew audible. Avery kept pressure on Nolan's thigh. "Liam." He turned pale under the fluorescent lights. "The system says we have 4. Avery stared at him for half a second. 4 kits did not vanish. 1 could be misplaced. 1 could be used and not scanned. 2 meant sloppy. 4 meant somebody had stopped counting, or someone had counted too well. The trauma bay doors opened. Dr. Garrett Voss stepped in. He wore surgical greens under a white coat, the sleeves pushed to the elbows. His silver hair was combed back. His face was composed, almost serene, the way it always was when people were bleeding. He had the kind of presence hospital brochures loved. Calm hands. Heroic history. Eyes that looked directly into cameras without seeming to try. To the public, he was the physician who had rebuilt bodies after overseas bombings. To donors, he was proof that Red Mesa deserved more funding. To administrators, he was a miracle in a lab coat. To young surgeons, he was either a mentor or a warning depending on how close they stood. To Avery, he was very good at his job. That had always been enough. "Status," Voss said. "Femoral injury." Avery answered. "Unstable, tourniquet holding poorly. Shunt kit is missing from trauma stock." The slightest pause moved across his face. It lasted less than a breath. Then it was gone. "Then we improvise." He moved to the table, gloved quickly, and took over the field as if the missing kit were an inconvenience, not a threat. The team adjusted around him. He asked for instruments before anyone else thought to offer them. He spoke in short, clean commands. He never raised his voice. For 47 minutes, Trauma 3 became a small war. Nolan Briggs tried to die twice. They did not let him. When it was over, when the bleeding was controlled and the surgical team rolled him upstairs, the room looked like every hard save looked. Bloody wrappers, empty suction canisters, trampled gauze, a gown dropped in the corner. A floor tech waiting by the door with a mop and a blank expression. Liam stood beside the opened cabinet, looking ashamed. Avery stripped off her gloves. "Show me the inventory." He led her to the supply room. The computer screen glowed blue in the dim utility light. Liam pulled up the trauma vascular supplies and turned the monitor toward her. "Vascular shunt kit. Available quantity 4. Last restock Monday, August 12th. Last usage, none this week." Avery stared at the screen until the letters blurred slightly. "Maybe it is a scan error," Liam said. "Maybe," but she did not believe it. She printed the inventory page, folded it once, and placed it in the side pocket of her scrub pants. Liam noticed. "You want me to tell Supply? I will handle it." He nodded, relieved to have the decision taken away from him. Avery walked back through the trauma corridor. The hospital had settled into its night rhythm again. A janitor pushed a cart near the elevators. A family whispered in the waiting area. The overhead lights hummed with that familiar electric fatigue that belonged only to hospitals after midnight. Near the nurses' station, Dr. Voss stood speaking with Colonel Patricia Reeves, the deputy medical commander. Reeves wore her uniform like armor and her smile like procedure. Voss had one hand in his coat pocket and the other resting lightly on the counter. Avery slowed only because the printer beside them clicked to life. Colonel Reeves said the congressional visit is confirmed for next Thursday. Prosthetics outcomes will be part of the briefing. Voss nodded. Then make sure the rehabilitation reports are clean. Clean. The word landed strangely. Avery moved past them without looking over. Voss glanced at her. "Avery." She stopped. "Good work tonight," he said. "Briggs is alive because the room kept moving. The room moved without the equipment it was supposed to have." Colonel Reeves looked at Voss, then at Avery. Voss smiled with polite patience. "I will speak with Supply." Avery held his gaze. 4 kits were listed available. "I heard you. It almost cost us time we did not have. And yet the patient survived." The words were not cruel. That was what made them difficult to challenge. Voss said them like a fact wrapped in gratitude, delivered in a tone that made further concern sound like complaint. Avery nodded once. Yes, he did. She went to finish her charting and did not look back. By 6 in the morning, the desert outside had turned lavender. Avery's shift was technically over, but the hospital did not release people simply because a clock said it should. She helped transfer a pneumonia patient. She spoke with Nolan Briggs's mother by phone. She corrected a medication dose before it reached a patient who weighed half what the order assumed. Then, because she could not stop thinking about the missing kits, she took the long way out through the rehabilitation wing. Rehab was quieter than trauma. The walls were painted in warm colors that tried too hard. There were framed photographs of amputee athletes, adaptive sports teams, smiling veterans with carbon fiber limbs and desert sunsets behind them. The hallway smelled faintly of rubber mats, antiseptic, and burnt coffee from the therapy lounge. In room 214, Sergeant Tessa Monroe sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the empty space below her left knee. She was 29, a helicopter crew chief with a dry sense of humor and a stubborn mouth. Her dark blonde hair was cut short at her jaw. A compression sleeve covered the end of her residual limb. On the tray table beside her sat a paper cup of orange juice and a stack of untouched breakfast eggs. Avery knocked softly. "Bad time." Tessa looked over. "Unless you brought a new leg in your pocket, it is all bad time." Avery smiled and stepped inside. "How was pain overnight?" "Manageable." "That means terrible, but you do not want another lecture." "That is exactly what it means." Avery checked the dressing, the skin temperature, the chart on the wall. Everything physical looked as expected. Healing was happening. Slowly, unevenly, but happening. Tessa watched her. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "They said my fitting was supposed to happen this week. Then they said there was a scheduling delay. Then someone from case management told me I had already completed my first training session." Avery looked up. Tessa gave a short laugh. "I know. Pretty impressive. I walked on a leg I have never seen." Avery reached for the tablet mounted near the bed. She opened Tessa's rehabilitation record and entered her password. The page loaded. Her stomach tightened. Advanced prosthetic socket issued. Microprocessor knee system delivered. Initial gait training completed. Patient tolerated session well. Follow-up scheduled. Avery read the entries twice. The signature line held the name of a physical therapist who had been on maternity leave for 6 weeks. Tessa tried to read Avery's face. "What?" Avery kept her voice even. "Did anyone bring equipment yesterday?" "Number." "Any fitting appointment?" "Number." "Did anyone ask you to sign paperwork?" Tessa hesitated. Avery noticed. Who? A case manager. I do not remember her name. She said it was just to keep the prosthetics request active. What did it say? I did not read all of it. Tessa looked away, embarrassed and angry at the same time. I was on pain meds. She said if I did not sign it, might slow the process. Avery felt heat rise behind her ribs. The page on the tablet remained cheerful and complete. Every box checked. Every delay erased. Every promise made invisible by a signature and a code. Am I in trouble? Tessa asked. Avery turned the tablet off. Number. You have that face. What face? The one people get before they say something is complicated. Avery sat in the chair beside the bed. Tessa, I need you to tell me exactly what happened with the paperwork. Slowly. Tessa looked at her for a long moment. Then she began. The case manager had come after dinner. Female, brown hair, hospital badge turned backward. She had brought a form on a clipboard and said there were new federal tracking requirements. She had said everyone waiting for mobility equipment had to sign. She had placed her finger near the line and held the page angled down, not hidden exactly, but not easy to read. Tessa had been tired. Her stump hurt. She had wanted the woman to leave, so she signed. Avery wrote nothing down in front of her. She just listened. Outside the room, a group of therapy patients moved down the hall with walkers and parallel bars. A man in a wheelchair laughed at something his therapist said. Somewhere, rubber tips tapped the floor in a slow, uneven rhythm. Each sound made the tablet feel heavier in Avery's hand. When she left Tessa's room, she passed the glass doors leading to the rehab courtyard. Beyond them, hospital leadership had gathered around a photographer. Dr. Voss stood in the center beside Colonel Reeves and two donors in tailored suits. Behind them was a banner Avery had helped hang the week before. No wounded service member left waiting. The photographer lifted his camera. Voss placed a hand over his heart. The flash popped against the glass. Avery stood still in the hallway unseen behind the reflection of the rehab unit. On one side of the doors, a camera captured a promise. On the other, a soldier waited for a leg the system said she already had. The rest of the morning moved around Avery in pieces. She went to the records office first. The clerk on duty, Maria Alvarez, looked up from a breakfast burrito wrapped in foil. You look like you are about to ask me for something that will ruin my day. I need delivery confirmation for prosthetic equipment. Maria narrowed her eyes. For who? Tessa Monroe. That should be in supply chain. It should be. Maria studied her for 2 seconds too long, then wiped her hands and turned to the terminal. Avery stood behind the counter and watched the screen load. Maria clicked through 3 systems. Medical record, billing, procurement, vendor portal. The hospital had built a maze out of software, each program speaking just enough to the next to create the illusion of order. There, Maria said. Delivered Tuesday. Signed receipt. Who signed? Maria clicked. A scanned document appeared. The signature was a loose scribble beside a printed name. Elliot Kane. Maria went still. Avery noticed. What is it? Maria did not answer at first. Her eyes moved from the signature to the date. Elliot cannot have signed this. Why? Maria lowered her voice. He died last winter. The room seemed to lose air. Avery leaned closer to the screen. The date was 3 days ago. The signature belonged to a dead man. Maria clicked out of the document quickly as if it might burn her. You did not get this from me, she whispered. I did not get what from you. Maria looked relieved and frightened at the same time. Avery left the records office with nothing printed. Not yet. Printing meant a trail. A trail meant questions. Questions meant hands moving to cover what had been exposed. By then, the hospital was fully awake. Families crowded the elevators. Volunteers pushed book carts. A chaplain spoke softly with a woman near the ICU doors. The cafeteria sent up the smell of bacon-burnt toast and coffee strong enough to strip paint. Avery should have gone home. Instead, she climbed the stairs to the 3rd-floor administration corridor. The walls changed there. Less scuffed. Better framed artwork. More carpet. The air was cooler, softer, filtered through offices where people used words like efficiency outcomes and strategic alignment. There were no bed alarms here, no blood on shoes, no patients asking when they could walk again. At the far end of the hall, Dr. Voss's office door was open. Avery did not mean to stop. Then she heard her name. Voss was inside speaking with someone she could not see. "Nurse Knox is thorough," he said. "That is useful in trauma and inconvenient everywhere else." A man's voice answered low and tense. If she asks the supply chain, this could become a formal review. Then supply chain will show her what we want it to show. And Monroe. Avery's pulse moved into her throat. Voss's voice remained calm. "Monroe is one file. Do not panic over one file. There are more than one." Silence. Avery stood beside a framed photograph of Voss receiving a military medical award from a senator. In the photo, his smile was humble, almost shy. In the office, the unseen man continued. "The prosthetics fund was not supposed to be touched this quarter." "It was not touched," Voss said. "It was reclassified." "That is not the same thing." "It is exactly the same thing if the numbers close." Avery heard a chair move. Voss spoke again, colder now. "Fix the Monroe record. Move the pending notation to personal delay. Make sure the equipment chain matches the rehab note." The other voice dropped to a whisper. "If this reaches families, if it reaches the oversight board, it will not." Avery stepped back. Her heel brushed the carpet trim. The sound was tiny. Inside the office, the talking stopped. Avery turned and walked toward the stairwell, not fast enough to look guilty, not slow enough to look afraid. She kept her face neutral until the stairwell door closed behind her. Then she gripped the railing so hard her knuckles whitened. Fix the record. Personal delay. Numbers close. She had heard enough to understand that the missing shunt kits and Tessa's phantom prosthetic were not accidents floating loose in a messy system. They were connected by intention. Not proof yet. Not enough to accuse a man like Garrett Voss, but enough to change the shape of the hospital around her. When Avery reached the ground floor, Caleb Mercer was standing near the orthopedic consult desk dictating into his phone. He was 42, broad-shouldered, with tired eyes and a beard he kept trimmed because the hospital allowed it only if it looked intentional. He had been an Army orthopedic surgeon before transferring into the civilian military health system. Unlike Voss, Caleb did not collect rooms when he entered them. He stood in corners, listened carefully, and noticed when people stopped speaking. He ended the dictation when he saw Avery. "You look awful." "Thank you. That was clinical, not personal. I need to ask you something." Caleb glanced at the hallway behind her. "Should I be worried?" "Yes." They moved into an empty consult room. Avery closed the door. Caleb leaned against the counter. "Talk." She told him about the shunt kits, Tessa's record, the dead man's signature, Voss's conversation. Caleb did not interrupt. That was one of the reasons she trusted him. When she finished, the room was quiet except for the vent ticking overhead. Caleb rubbed both hands over his face. "Meridian," he said. Avery looked at him. "What?" "Meridian Orthotics. They appeared on a procurement list 2 months ago. I thought it was strange." "Why?" "I have never seen their reps, never received their fittings, never spoken to a clinician from their company. Could be remote contracting." "Could be," he said. "But prosthetics is not printer paper. You do not just bill $500,000 in custom mobility equipment without bodies, sockets, measurements, fittings, follow-up. $500,000. The number sat between them. Avery said how much money moves through rehab. Caleb gave a grim, humorless breath. Enough to make honest people careful and dishonest people creative. Someone knocked on the door. They both went silent. A unit secretary opened it halfway. "Dr. Mercer, sorry. Your 10 o'clock is waiting." Caleb nodded. 1 minute. The door closed. He lowered his voice. "Do not send anything through hospital email." "I know." "Do not accuse Voss without documents." "I know." "And Avery." She looked at him. "If this is what it sounds like, it is bigger than Voss." She wanted to argue, but she could not. That was the first moment she felt fear properly. Not the sharp fear of blood loss or violence, a deeper one. The kind that comes when a room you know suddenly has another door in it, and you realize it has been there the whole time. At noon, Avery finally went to the locker room. Her hands smelled like antiseptic no matter how long she washed them. She changed into jeans and a gray shirt, then sat on the wooden bench with her phone in her hand. Her locker door hung open. Inside were spare scrubs, a protein bar, an old photo of her and 2 flight nurses in front of a transport plane, and a small card from a patient's child that said, "Thank you for bringing my dad back." She stared at the card. Then she searched Meridian Orthotics and Mobility. The website looked professional at first glance. Blue logo, stock photos, phrases about restoring movement and honoring service. No staff directory, no clinical leadership, no patient portal. The contact address listed a business complex near the edge of Tucson not far from the airport. Avery copied the address into her phone. Outside, the sun was high and punishing. Heat rose from the parking lot in waves. She sat in her car with the engine running and the air conditioning struggling against the desert. She told herself to go home. Sleep. Think clearly. Instead, she drove. The address led to a beige business park with tinted windows and dying landscaping. Suite 214 was tucked between a tax preparation office and a company that sold security cameras. The blinds were drawn. The Meridian logo was not on the door. A cheap paper sign inside the window said the unit was available for lease. Avery stood in the walkway listening to traffic hiss along the road beyond the parking lot. No delivery dock, no clinical space, no prosthetic lab. No boxes, no staff, no equipment. Just a locked door and dust gathered along the threshold. She took 3 photographs. A man from the security camera office stepped outside carrying a soda. "You looking for somebody?" "Meridian Orthotics." He frowned. "Never heard of them." "They are listed here." He glanced at Suite 214. "That place has been empty since before Christmas." Avery felt the sun on the back of her neck. "Thank you." She returned to her car and sat behind the wheel without turning the key. For a moment, the hospital seemed far away. The flags, the polished floors, Voss's calm voice, the banner in rehab. But her phone was full of proof that the clean records were sitting on top of something rotten. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You should be careful with old files. They often contain mistakes." Avery stared at the message. No name. No signature, just the sentence. She looked through the windshield at the empty suite. Then she looked at her own reflection in the rearview mirror and saw for the first time how tired she really was. When she returned to Red Mesa that evening for a short coverage shift, the hospital looked unchanged. That was the insult of it. Nothing in the walls admitted what she had seen. The lobby lights still glowed warmly. The volunteers still smiled. The plaque above the elevators still thanked donors for supporting wounded warriors. At the security desk, the guard waved her through. Avery back already. Lucky me. He laughed because he did not know. On the trauma floor, Liam was restocking gloves. "You hear about Briggs?" he asked. "Number. He is stable. ICU nurse said he asked for cheeseburgers. That is a good sign." Liam smiled, then noticed her expression. "Everything okay?" Avery almost said yes. The word rose out of habit. Instead, she said, "If you see missing stock again, you tell me directly." His smile faded. "Okay. Not supply, not the shared log, me." He nodded slowly. Avery moved to the nurse's station and signed in. Her password worked. Her badge worked. Her access looked normal. Still, the air around her had changed. Every camera dome felt less like safety and more like an eye. Every administrator walking past seemed to carry information in the set of their shoulders. At 9:40 p.m., Dr. Voss appeared beside the medication room. "Avery." She turned. He held 2 paper cups of coffee. He offered one to her. She did not take it. His smile was gentle, peace offering. "For what?" "For this morning. You seemed frustrated." "I was concerned." "Of course." He set the extra coffee on the counter between them. Concern is one of your strengths. It is also why people trust you. Avery waited. Voss glanced toward the busy trauma board. But concern can become suspicion if we are tired enough. I have seen it happen to good clinicians. They stop seeing patients and start seeing enemies. That sounds dangerous. It is. He stepped a little closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. You have served. You know what stress does to perception. Avery felt the sentence slide into place like a blade. A person could deny an accusation. A person could fight a reprimand. But doubt was harder. Doubt entered quietly. It used your own exhaustion against you. She looked at him and thought of Tessa sitting on the edge of a bed, asking about a leg that existed only in a record. I know what records do to reality when the wrong people write them, she said. Voss's eyes changed. Only for a second. Then the public face returned. Get some rest when your shift ends, he said. That is an order disguised as advice. He walked away, leaving the coffee untouched. Avery watched him disappear into the surgical corridor. A monitor alarm sounded in trauma 2. The spell broke. She moved toward the patient because that was still the job. Airway, breathing, circulation, pain, blood, family, chart, repeat. The work did not pause because truth had become dangerous. But by midnight, Avery had made her decision. She would not confront Voss again. She would not trust hospital systems. She would collect proof the way she collected vital signs carefully, repeatedly, without drama, until the pattern could no longer be dismissed as fatigue. After her shift, she stood alone in the supply room and opened the inventory screen. She searched Meridian. The system loaded slowly. Then the vendor history appeared. Not one order, dozens. Prosthetic components. Trauma vascular kits. Spinal braces. Mobility fittings. Outpatient rehab packages. Behavioral health access bundles. Total payments approved across 6 months. The number at the bottom of the screen made her stop breathing. Avery printed nothing. She took one photograph. Then she heard footsteps outside the supply room. She locked her phone and turned toward the shelves just as the door opened. Colonel Patricia Reeves stood there in uniform, her face unreadable. Nurse Knox, she said, why are you still here? Avery lifted a box of sterile dressings from the shelf. Checking trauma stock. Reeves looked at the screen behind her. Avery did not move. The colonel's gaze returned to her face. At this hour, Avery held the box against her chest. The patients arrive at this hour, too. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Reeves stepped back. Go home, Avery. It was not advice. It was not concern. It was a warning dressed in command. Avery nodded, signed out, and walked to the staff parking lot beneath a sky filled with hard white stars. The desert wind moved warm and dry across the asphalt. Somewhere beyond the fence line, a helicopter thudded through the dark. She sat in her car and looked at the photo on her phone. 6 months of payments, dozens of orders, a ghost company in an empty suite, a dead man signing deliveries, a soldier waiting for a leg. Inside the hospital, the lights stayed bright and steady, as if nothing inside them could rot. Avery started the engine. This time she did not drive home. She drove to a 24-hour copy shop on Speedway Boulevard, parked under a flickering sign, and carried her phone inside like it was already evidence. The copy shop smelled like warm toner cheap coffee and floor cleaner that had been poured too heavily near the front door. At that hour, the place was nearly empty. A college student sat near the window printing lecture notes. An older man argued quietly with the self-service machine. Behind the counter, a clerk in a faded baseball cap watched a late-night game on a small television with no sound. Avery stood in front of the scanner with her phone in one hand and a prepaid flash drive in the other. She had spent years keeping people alive by trusting systems built for speed. Blood banks, trauma carts, medication scanners, surgical teams, chain of command. One person could not do everything alone, so medicine depended on the belief that the next person had done their part honestly. Now she was paying cash at a copy shop because she no longer trusted the hospital printer. The first page came out slowly. Vendor history, Meridian orthotics, and mobility. The paper was warm when she lifted it from the tray. At the bottom, the total payment amount sat in a clean black font as harmless as a grocery receipt. $2,486,000. Avery read the number twice. It did not become easier to understand. $2 million could buy prosthetic limbs, surgical equipment, rehab sessions, home modifications, counseling, transportation for families. It could mean a soldier learning to walk beside his daughter. It could mean a mother holding her son through withdrawal without being put on another wait list. It could mean a Marine surviving a bleed because the correct kit was actually inside the drawer. On paper, that money had already helped people. In the real world, people were still waiting. She copied the files from her phone to the flash drive, then printed only the pages she needed. Vendor summaries, invoice numbers, delivery confirmations, Tessa Monroe's rehabilitation record. The photo of Suite 214 with the lease sign visible through dusty glass. When the machine beeped, the clerk looked up. "You need help with that?" Avery pulled the printed pages into a neat stack. "No, thank you." Her voice sounded normal. That surprised her. Outside, Speedway Boulevard was washed in yellow streetlights. Cars moved past in small, lonely bursts. Tucson at night had a way of looking empty, even when it was not as if the desert could swallow sound before it reached the next block. Avery sat in her car and placed the pages in a tan envelope she bought from the copy shop rack. She wrote nothing on the front. No name, no case number, no dramatic label. Evidence did not need a title. She put the envelope beneath the passenger seat and drove home with both hands on the wheel. Her apartment was on the second floor of a quiet complex near an old wash lined with mesquite trees. The walls were thin. The air conditioner rattled. A neighbor's television laughed through the floor. She placed the envelope inside a kitchen drawer beneath takeout menus and batteries, then stood in the dark with the refrigerator hum behind her. For the first time that night she let herself shake, only for a minute. Then she washed her face, changed clothes, and sat at her small table with a yellow legal pad. She did not write conclusions. She wrote only facts. Missing vascular shunt kits listed as available. Tessa Monroe listed as fitted. Patient denies receiving equipment. Delivery signed by Elliot Kane. Deceased 11 months. Meridian listed at Suite 214. Suite empty since before Christmas. Vendor payments over 6 months exceed $2 million. Voss instructed someone to fix Monroe record. When she finished, the page looked too simple for what it meant. At 6:12 in the morning, Avery called Caleb Mercer. He answered on the fourth ring, voice rough with sleep. "Someone better be dying." Number. A pause. "That is worse. I found the vendor address." He became awake very quickly. And empty office. No equipment, no staff. The suite has been vacant for months. Caleb did not respond right away. Avery heard movement on his end, then running water, then a door closing. How much? More than $2 million through Meridian alone. He cursed under his breath. There are other vendor names in the history. Canyon Recovery Access, Homefront Surgical Logistics, Pioneer Limb Systems. I have not checked them yet. Do not check them alone. I already know what you are going to say. Good, then listen to it faster. Avery rubbed her eyes. Caleb. No, this is past suspicious records. This is federal theft. This is patient harm. This is people with access and motive. I need someone outside the hospital. Yes. I need someone who understands military medical money. Yes. I need someone who can make this real before Voss buries it. Caleb was quiet. Then he said Defense Criminal Investigative Service. Avery looked at the legal pad. I was thinking the same thing. I know someone who knows someone. Not a friend. A contact from an old procurement case. Give me a name. Special Agent Mara Ellison. Avery wrote it down. Caleb lowered his voice. Avery, listen to me. Once you call her, you cannot half step back into normal life. You will be a witness whether you like that word or not. I already am. No. Right now, you are a nurse with a bad feeling and some documents. After the call, you are the person who can hurt them. Avery looked at the tan envelope in the kitchen drawer. They are already hurting patients. Caleb exhaled slowly. I will send you the number. The text came 1 minute later. Avery waited until 9, not because she wanted to. Because calling a federal agent before business hours with copied hospital records felt like the kind of thing that should be done with clear daylight in the windows. At 9:03, she dialed. A woman answered on the second ring. Ellison. My name is Avery Knox. I am a trauma nurse at Red Mesa Joint Medical Center. Dr. Caleb Mercer gave me this number. Mara Ellison did not ask who Caleb was. She did not sound surprised. She did not sound friendly. What is the nature of the concern? Avery closed her eyes and began. She told the story in order. Not beautifully, not emotionally. Just as she had written it on the legal pad. Missing equipment. False treatment records. A living patient marked completed. A dead employee signing delivery receipts. An empty vendor office. Large payments. Dr. Garrett Voss. This time saying his name aloud felt like opening a sealed door. Mara asked short questions. What dates? What patient initials? What system generated the receiving confirmation? Who else saw the records? Did you use hospital email? Did you remove original documents? Avery answered every question she could. When she finished, Mara went silent long enough for Avery to check whether the call had dropped. Then the agent said, "Do not use hospital email again. Do not copy anything to a hospital computer. Do not discuss this with administrators. Do not confront Dr. Voss. I already spoke to him about the fraud. Not directly." Good, keep it that way. Avery looked toward the window. Morning light made the blinds glow pale gold. Mara continued. I need copies of what you have. Not photographs sent over a personal phone. We will arrange a secure transfer. Until then, keep the documents with you or somewhere he cannot access. He does not know I have them. Assume he does. Avery felt the words settle low in her chest. Mara said, and Ms. Knox. Yes, if your instincts tell you something is wrong, leave the building. You are not useful to anyone as a martyr. Avery almost laughed. It came out as a breath. I'm not trying to be one. Most people who become one are not. The call ended with a meeting plan. Not at the hospital, not at Avery's apartment. A public place first, then a secure handoff. Mara wanted a timeline copies patient identifiers and names of anyone who might verify the pattern. Avery spent the next hour rebuilding the story from the beginning. By noon, she had 3 columns on her legal pad. Patients, vendors, approvals. The columns did not line up perfectly yet, but some names appeared too often. Garrett Voss approved high-value purchases. Colonel Patricia Reeves cleared urgent operational exceptions. Supply technician Elliot Kane appeared on old and new delivery receipts despite being dead. Case management notes were entered by floating staff who seemed impossible to locate after the fact. Avery circled one name from the procurement chain, Martin Sells. She did not know him well. He worked in supply administration on the 2nd floor. A thin man with rimless glasses and hands that always seemed busy even when he stood still. He was the kind of employee no patient ever saw and no doctor ever remembered until something went missing. At 3 p.m., Avery returned to Red Mesa for her scheduled shift. The hospital lobby was crowded with afternoon discharge traffic. A little boy in a wheelchair held a red balloon. A woman in uniform argued softly into her phone near the elevators. 2 veterans in matching caps sat beneath the donor wall drinking coffee and watching everyone come and go. Avery moved through them with the envelope tucked inside her work bag. Every badge scanner seemed louder than usual. At the trauma desk, Liam Carter looked up from restocking suture trays. You okay? Yes. You look like you did not sleep. That is because I did not sleep. He gave a nervous smile. That was a joke, right? Number. His smile disappeared. Avery softened her voice. I need to ask you something. Quietly. Liam glanced around. Okay. The missing vascular kits from Briggs. Did anyone ask you to change the supply note? His face changed in a way that answered before he did. Who? Liam swallowed. Mr. Sells came down yesterday. He said the issue was a misplacement error. He asked me to update the note so it did not trigger a variance report. Did you? No. His voice dropped. I told him I was busy. Good. He said Dr. Voss did not want unnecessary noise before the congressional visit. Avery felt the sentence click into place. Liam, do not change that note. I was not going to. If anyone asks again, you tell me. He nodded. Then after a beat, he said, is this about more than the kids? Avery looked at him. He deserved truth, but not enough truth to place him in the center of the blast. Yes. His face went pale again. All right, he said. That was the thing about Liam. He was young, he was scared. But fear did not make him useless, it made him careful. Later that evening, Avery found Tessa Monroe in the rehabilitation gym. The room was full of parallel bars mats, weight machines, and mirrors. Patients practiced ordinary miracles under fluorescent lights. One man relearned how to lift his foot over a rubber cone. A woman with a shoulder brace cried quietly while her therapist counted repetitions. Tessa sat near the window, arms crossed, watching another amputee take steps on a temporary training leg. Avery stopped beside her. How is pain today? Angry. That is not on the official scale. It should be. Avery looked towards the therapist, then lowered her voice. Do you remember anything else about the form you signed? Tessa's eyes stayed on the patient walking between the bars. She smelled like peppermint gum. Avery waited. She had a wedding ring. Gold, big stone. Her badge flipped backward, but I saw part of the name when she leaned over. What did it start with? Maybe K? Maybe R. I was tired. That helps. Tessa finally looked at her. Avery, why do I feel like everyone keeps asking me questions except the one that matters? What is the one that matters? Am I getting my leg or not? Avery had answered dying men in aircraft. She had told families to sit down before giving them news. She had lied only when mercy required it and never when hope would do more damage than truth. Now she looked at Tessa and hated the hospital for making the answer complicated. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you do. Tessa studied her. That is not yes, number. At least it is honest. Avery reached into her pocket and pulled out a small notepad. I need your permission to write down what happened. Tessa looked back toward the patient in the parallel bars. The woman took one step, then another, her therapist walking close behind. Write this down, Tessa said. I did not receive the prosthetic system listed in my chart. I did not complete gait training. I did sign a form because I was told it would keep my care moving. I am still waiting. Avery wrote every word. Tessa added, and write that I am tired of being grateful for delays. The pen paused. Then Avery wrote that too. The next 2 days passed in fragments. Avery worked her shifts. She treated chest pain lacerations, burns, overdoses, panic attacks, dehydration, one fractured pelvis, one retired staff sergeant who apologized for bleeding on her shoes, and one child who gave her a sticker for being brave during his stitches. Between patients, she gathered small facts. Meridian had no active state supplier license under that name. Canyon Recovery Access listed a phone number that rang to a voicemail box that was full. Homefront Surgical Logistics shared a mailing address with a tax service in Nevada. Pioneer Limb Systems had billed for components identical to those Meridian claimed to deliver. The pattern no longer felt hidden. It felt arrogant. On the third night, Avery met Caleb outside the ambulance bay. The sky over Tucson was low and purple, the air heavy with the smell of monsoon rain that had not yet broken. Caleb wore surgical scrubs and looked as if he had been awake for 2 days. She handed him copies of the vendor summaries. He read them under the harsh white light near the bay doors. This is not just prosthetics, he said. Number, trauma equipment, behavioral health, spinal braces, outpatient rehab. They are skimming across departments, small enough in each place to look like system noise, large enough together to be a machine. An ambulance backed into the bay with a short burst of warning beeps. They both stepped aside. Caleb folded the pages and handed them back. Ellison needs to move fast. She is building the case. Cases take time. So does bleeding out. Caleb looked at her sharply. Avery realized how tired she sounded. He softened. "Have you slept?" "A little. That means no. I will sleep when the documents are out of my hands." Caleb glanced through the glass doors toward the trauma desk. "Voss asked about you today." Avery kept her face still. "What did he ask?" "Whether you seemed strained. Whether I had noticed any judgment issues. Whether you had been involving yourself in administrative matters outside your role." Avery looked away toward the ambulance lights. "There it is. He is building a version of you. Obsessed nurse, tired veteran, unstable witness." Caleb nodded. Avery gave a short, humorless laugh. "Efficient. He has done this before." The sentence hung between them. Avery turned back. "What do you mean?" Caleb hesitated. "Years ago, there was a physical therapist who questioned delayed mobility equipment. Her name was Rachel Kim. She resigned after an internal review. For what? Hostile communication, improper access, emotional instability. Was she wrong? I do not know. But his face said he suspected otherwise." Avery's phone vibrated. A message from Mara Ellison. Chapel parking lot. Friday, 10:45 p.m. Bring hard copies. Come alone first. If you feel watched, leave. Avery showed Caleb. He read it and shook his head. "I hate that last sentence." "So do I." Friday came with heat that pressed against the hospital windows and made every hallway feel sealed. The congressional visit was less than a week away. Administrators moved through Red Mesa with clipboards and tight smiles. Banners were straightened, patient success stories were rehearsed. A camera crew toured the rehabilitation wing while Tessa Monroe sat in her room with the door half closed. At 5:20 p.m., Avery found a new note in her personnel file. Medication access irregularity under review. The listed time was during a code blue when she had been in Trauma 2 with 6 witnesses. She stared at the screen. The accusation was not meant to succeed. It was meant to exist. At 700, Colonel Reeves appeared at the trauma desk. "Nurse Knox, my office." Avery followed her upstairs. Reeves's office faced the west side of the campus where the sun was sinking behind the mountains. The room was spotless. Challenge coins lined the shelf. A framed photograph showed Reeves standing beside Voss at a military medical conference. Reeves closed the door. "I will be direct," she said. "I would appreciate that. There are concerns regarding your conduct." Avery stood rather than sit. "What concerns?" "You have been accessing records outside immediate patient care. I have reviewed records connected to active treatment delays and equipment discrepancies." "You are not an auditor." "No. I am the nurse patients ask when the record says one thing and their body says another." Reeves's expression tightened. "You need to be very careful with your tone." Avery felt anger rise clean and sharp. "My tone is not the problem." Reeves stepped closer to her desk. "This hospital is under scrutiny. We cannot have staff creating confusion because they are frustrated by complex systems they do not fully understand." Avery looked at the framed photo of Reeves and Voss. "Who fully understands them?" The colonel did not answer. Avery saw it then. Not guilt exactly. Fear. Reeves was afraid of Voss, or afraid of the machine around him, or afraid of what would happen if the hospital image cracked before the congressional visit. Maybe all three. Reeves lowered her voice. "Go back to your patients. Stop digging through administrative files. Let leadership handle leadership problems." Avery opened the door. Patients are leadership problems when leadership forgets they are people. She left before Reeves could answer. At 10:17 p.m., Avery stood in the locker room and removed the tan envelope from the back of her locker. She had added the personnel note, Liam's statement about Martin Sell's Tessa's handwritten words, and a printed copy of the Meridian vendor payments. The envelope was thicker now, heavier. She slid it into her work bag and checked the hallway. Empty. The chapel parking lot sat on the north side of campus beyond the main hospital and away from the emergency entrance. Families went there when they needed quiet. Staff went there when they needed to cry without witnesses. At night, the chapel windows glowed faintly blue. Avery planned to leave through the west corridor cut past radiology and cross the courtyard. At the trauma desk, Liam looked up. "You heading out?" "Soon." He nodded, then glanced at the clock. "Dr. Voss has been looking for you." Avery felt the air shift. "When?" "10 minutes ago. He asked if you were still on the floor." "Where is he now?" "I thought he went upstairs." Avery tightened her grip on the strap of her bag. A trauma alarm chimed from Bay 2. A patient coughed behind a curtain. A printer spat out discharge instructions. Ordinary sounds, ordinary night. Then the overhead lights flickered once. The badge reader beside the west corridor door blinked from green to yellow. Avery heard locks engage somewhere down the hall, one after another, soft and final. Liam looked toward the ceiling. "That is not a fire alarm." No, it was not. Avery turned toward the surgical corridor. At the far end, behind the glass doors, Dr. Garrett Voss stood in his white coat watching her with the calm face he wore when everyone else was bleeding. The yellow light above the west corridor door blinked slowly, almost politely, as if the hospital were asking permission before sealing itself shut. Avery did not move. At the far end of the surgical corridor, Dr. Garrett Voss stood behind the glass doors with his hands at his sides. The fluorescent lights reflected across the panes and cut his face into pale strips. He was not smiling now. He was not performing for donors, patients, or staff. The version of him that stood there belonged to closed offices, corrected records, and signatures from dead men. Liam Carter looked from Avery to the doors. "Is this a drill?" Avery kept her eyes on Voss. "Number." The word came out low enough that only Liam heard it. The trauma desk continued its work around them for another few seconds, held together by habit. A printer clicked. A monitor chimed. Someone behind a curtain asked for water. Then another lock sounded in the distance. A solid mechanical click rolled down the hallway, followed by another, then another. People began to notice. A respiratory therapist stepped out of Trauma 2. "Why are the access doors locked?" The charge nurse checked the security panel. "Internal hold." "We did not call one." Avery's hand tightened around the strap of her work bag. Inside it, the tan envelope pressed against her hip like a second pulse. Voss pushed through the glass doors. The badge reader should have rejected him, but the door opened without hesitation. Of course it did. This was his hospital in all the ways that mattered. He walked slowly, not because he had time, but because he wanted everyone to see that he believed he did. The white coat moved softly around his knees. His shoes made no sound on the polished floor. Avery turned to Liam without looking away from Voss. "Go to Trauma 2. Liam did not move. "Avery, now." His throat worked. "Your bag." "Liam." The command in her voice finally reached him. He stepped back, but only as far as the medication cart. His face had gone white. Voss stopped 10 feet from the nurse's station. "Nurse Knox," he said. The formal address was worse than anger. Avery felt every person nearby become still. The charge nurse stood with one hand on the phone. The respiratory therapist held an oxygen mask at her side. A patient behind the curtain stopped talking. Avery answered evenly, "Dr. Voss." He glanced at the yellow security light. "There has been a safety concern. I noticed." "Good. Then you understand why no one is leaving the unit until it is resolved." Avery looked toward the west doors, then back to him. "What kind of safety concern?" His eyes moved to her bag. Missing hospital materials. It was clever. She almost admired how quickly he had chosen the shape of the lie. Avery shifted her weight, feeling the ache from 2 shifts and too little sleep. "You locked down a trauma wing for missing materials." Voss stepped closer. "When the materials contain protected patient information, yes." The charge nurse found her voice. "Doctor, should I call security command?" Voss did not look at her. "Security is aware." That was when Avery understood the full shape of it. He had not panicked. Panic made mistakes loud. Voss had built a clean room around the moment. Internal hold, protected information. Security aware. A nurse under review. A bag with documents she could not explain without admitting she had copied them. He did not need to shoot anyone. Not yet. He only needed to make the evidence look stolen, make Avery look unstable, and make everyone else grateful when he restored order. Avery lowered her voice. "This is over, Garrett." His expression did not change, but something tightened at the corner of his mouth. "No," he said. "This is a misunderstanding that you have allowed to grow dangerous. Tell that to Tessa Monroe." His eyes sharpened. Behind him, Colonel Patricia Reeves appeared at the surgical corridor entrance. She stopped when she saw the space between them. Her face revealed too much before she controlled it. Avery saw fear there. Not surprise. Fear. Voss did not turn. "Colonel, please clear non-essential personnel from the corridor." Reeves stood still. "Colonel," he repeated. She moved, but slowly, guiding 2 technicians back toward the side hall. Her eyes flicked to Avery once. It was not apology. It was not help. It was a warning that had arrived too late. The charge nurse whispered into the phone, now one hand cupped around the receiver. Avery could not hear the words. Voss could. "Hang up," he said. The charge nurse froze. Avery saw the moment everyone understood the situation had moved beyond policy. No one had raised a weapon. No one had shouted. But the hallway knew. The body always knows before the mind admits it. Voss extended one hand toward Avery. "Give me the bag. Number. That bag contains unauthorized copies of patient records. It contains proof. It contains a crime you committed." Avery almost laughed. "That is your defense." His voice softened. "My defense is that you are exhausted, angry, and confused. You have been accessing files outside your role. You have been speaking to patients about administrative matters you do not understand. You have involved Dr. Mercer, who has never forgiven this institution for passing him over for surgical director." Avery heard Caleb's name and felt a cold line move down her spine. Voss continued. "You have created a story because you needed someone to blame. You build a prosthetic leg to a woman who is still sitting in rehab without one. Procurement delays are not fraud. You used Elliot Kane's signature. For the first time, the mask cracked. Only a little, but she saw it. The man beneath was not wounded. He was furious. "Give me the bag," he said. Liam stepped forward. "Doctor, maybe we should wait for security." Voss turned his head slowly. Liam stopped. Avery felt the danger shift toward him. "No," she said. Voss looked back at her. "Then do not involve children." Liam flushed fear and humiliation mixing across his face. Avery slid the bag from her shoulder. She held it in front of her with both hands. Voss relaxed by a fraction. That was enough. Avery turned suddenly and threw the bag across the counter toward the medication room entrance. The movement shattered the hallway. Voss lunged. Avery shoved the rolling chart rack into his path. Metal wheels screamed across the floor. The rack struck his knee, and he stumbled, one hand catching the counter. "Run," Avery shouted. Liam moved. So did Voss. His hand went inside his coat. The gun came out black against the white cloth. For half a second, the hospital vanished. There was no trauma desk, no monitors, no yellow security light. There was only Avery's old training rising through her bones like an alarm. Distance, cover, hands, weapon, sightline, exits. The west corridor was locked. The surgical corridor belonged to him. The nurse's station was open beneath the counter. Avery saw the bag lying near the medication room door. The zipper had opened. The tan envelope had slid halfway out. Voss raised the gun. "Do not touch it." No one breathed. A patient began crying softly behind a curtain. Avery lifted her hands. "Garrett, you should have stopped." His voice was not loud. That made it more terrible. Avery took one slow step to the side, placing herself between Voss and Liam. "You stole from wounded soldiers. I kept this hospital alive. You kept yourself untouchable." His hand trembled then just once. "You have no idea what it takes to run a place like this. The begging, the politics, the audits written by people who have never held a clamp in a bleeding body, the donors who want miracles and the commanders who want clean numbers. I moved money where it had to go, to empty suites, to services this hospital needed. Tessa needed her leg. He flinched at the name not from guilt, but irritation. Individual delays happen. Lucas Bell was dead when you billed his therapy. A murmur moved through the staff behind her. Voss heard it. The gun shifted. Enough. Avery knew he had lost the room. Maybe he knew it too. Whatever story he had planned no longer fit the faces watching him. A locked unit could be explained. A bag of copied files could be explained. A gun in a trauma wing could not. The charge nurse pressed something beneath the desk. Voss saw her arm move. "Hands up," he snapped. The charge nurse jerked back. Avery used the movement. She dropped low, grabbed the tan envelope from the spilled bag and shoved it under the nurse's station with all the force she had. It slid across the floor, skimming beneath the cabinet base. Voss fired. The sound hit the hallway like a physical blow. The first shot punched into the wall above the medication room. Plaster burst outward. Someone screamed. Avery felt no pain at first, only impact as she threw herself behind the counter. Liam fell beside her, hands over his head. "Get it," Avery said. He stared at her, frozen. The envelope, push it back. Another shot cracked through the desk panel. Wood splintered inches from Liam's shoulder. That woke him. He twisted onto his stomach and reached under the cabinet. His fingers scraped the floor. "I cannot reach it." Avery pressed one hand against the counter and lifted herself enough to see Voss moving around the desk. The gun was low now, close to his leg, but ready. Avery grabbed the metal stool beside her and kicked it hard. It rolled into Voss's shin. He cursed and stumbled. Liam stretched farther cheek against the floor. Almost. Avery heard running somewhere beyond the locked doors. Voices. Pounding. The alarm had changed from silent to active, a high-repeating tone that cut through every room. Voss pointed the gun down. Avery rose. She did not think about it. She did not choose it in words. She simply moved because Liam was on the floor and the gun had followed him. Garrett. He turned. The second shot hit Avery below the ribs. Pain opened bright and total. Her body slammed back against the counter. For one strange second, she noticed the details with impossible clarity. The coffee Voss had left earlier still sitting cold near the medication scanner. A smear of toner on her thumb from the copy shop. Liam's eyes wide with terror. The yellow light still blinking over the locked door. Then her knees weakened. She caught herself on the counter and left a red handprint across a stack of intake forms. Voss stared at her as if she had betrayed him by bleeding. The alarm screamed overhead. Behind Voss, Caleb Mercer appeared at the entrance to Trauma 2. He took in the scene in one breath. Avery upright by force alone. Liam on the floor. Voss with the gun. The blood spreading through Avery's scrub top. Garrett, Caleb said. The voice was steady, but Avery heard the strain inside it. Voss turned halfway. "Stay back." Caleb raised both hands. "Put the gun down." She stole classified patient documents. "No," Caleb said. "She found what you buried." Voss's face twisted. Avery slid down the counter, leaving blood behind. The floor was cold when her hip struck it. She pressed her hand to the wound and felt warmth spreading between her fingers. Liam was still reaching. "Liam," she whispered. He looked at her. She nodded once toward the cabinet. His jaw clenched. He pushed his arm farther under the baseboard, shoulder scraping against the metal edge. Voss saw. He stepped toward him. Caleb moved at the same time. "Garrett, look at me. Do not come closer. You are a surgeon. You know where you hit her. She needs pressure now. She made this happen." "No," Caleb said. "You did." Avery tried to breathe. The air would not go deep enough. Every inhale felt jagged. She had watched hundreds of patients discover the geography of their own pain. Now she was inside it, mapping the edges by touch. The envelope shifted beneath the cabinet. Liam's fingers found a corner. Voss raised the gun again. Avery gathered what little strength she had and kicked the bottom of the crash cart beside her. It rolled forward and struck the side of the desk with a loud metallic crash. The sound drew Voss's eyes. Liam pulled the envelope free and shoved it under his own scrub top. Voss saw the movement too late. His face went blank. Then the west corridor doors burst open. 3 hospital police officers entered with weapons drawn. Behind them came 2 security supervisors and Colonel Reeves, who had both hands raised, as if she herself were under arrest. Dr. Voss, the lead officer, shouted, "Drop the weapon." The hallway became a series of commands. "Drop it. Step away. Hands where we can see them. Do not move." Voss did not drop the gun. He looked at the officers, then at Caleb, then at Avery on the floor. For one awful second, Avery thought he might raise it again. Not toward her, toward himself, toward Liam, toward anyone still holding the truth. Caleb saw it too. "Garrett," he said quietly, "do not turn this into the only thing they remember about you." Voss laughed once. It was a broken, empty sound. The only thing he said. "You think this is the only thing?" His hand lowered by an inch. The lead officer advanced. "Weapon down, now." Voss looked toward Colonel Reeves. She did not meet his eyes. That seemed to finish him. The gun slipped from his hand and struck the floor. The sound was small compared to the shots. 2 officers surged forward, forcing Voss against the wall. His cheek pressed against a framed safety notice. His white coat bunched beneath their hands as they cuffed him. He did not fight. He did not apologize. He stared at Avery with an expression she could not name. Caleb was already on his knees beside her. "Pressure," he called. "I need gauze. Trauma pack, now." The staff unfroze all at once. The respiratory therapist ran for oxygen. The charge nurse grabbed the emergency hemorrhage kit. Someone pulled a gurney from Trauma 3. Liam crawled to Avery's side, one arm still pressed against his chest where the envelope was hidden beneath his scrubs. Avery tried to speak. Caleb leaned close. "Do not talk." She ignored him. "Envelope." Liam's voice shook. "I have it. Ellison. I will call her." Caleb pressed hard against the wound. Pain tore through Avery and turned the ceiling lights into white stars. "Stay with me," he said. Avery tried to focus on his face. Caleb Mercer, who hated public speeches. Caleb, who looked tired even when he smiled. Caleb, whose hands were covered in her blood but did not shake. "Tell Tessa," Avery whispered. His eyes tightened. "You are going to tell her yourself." Avery wanted to believe him. She really did. The team lifted her onto the gurney. The movement broke something loose inside the pane, and the hallway tilted. She heard Nolan Briggs's mother crying in her memory. She heard helicopters. She heard Voss saying clean numbers. She heard Tessa saying she was tired of being grateful for delays. As they rolled her toward Trauma 3, she saw the wall where the first bullet had struck. White plaster dust covered the floor beneath it. A nurse stepped through it and left a red footprint. In the doorway, Colonel Reeves stood with her back against the wall, watching officers lead Voss away. Her face had gone gray. Avery looked at her as the gurney passed. Reeves opened her mouth as if to say something. No words came. Trauma. 3 swallowed Avery in light. The room that had saved Nolan Briggs now turned itself around her. Hands cut away her scrub top. Someone placed oxygen over her face. Someone called for blood. Caleb's voice stayed close, giving orders with a calm that sounded almost violent. Entry wound left upper abdomen. Pressure maintained. Type and cross. Call surgery. Page vascular, now. Avery floated beneath the words. The ceiling tiles moved above her, then stopped. Liam appeared near the door. An officer tried to push him back, but he held up the envelope with both hands. "It is evidence," he said. His voice cracked, but he did not lower it. The officer took it carefully as if the paper itself were alive. Avery saw the tan edge disappear into a plastic evidence bag. Only then did she let her eyes close. For a moment, the pain faded far enough for another thought to rise. The hospital had finally seen the gun. Now someone had to make them see the crime that came before it. The oxygen mask filled with the sound of her own breathing. In. Out. Then even that became distant. The first thing Avery heard was not a voice. It was water. A slow drip somewhere beyond the dark. One drop, then another steady enough to become a clock. For a while, she floated inside that sound, unable to decide if she was awake or still trapped in the hallway listening to blood hit polished tile. Then the drip became a monitor, a soft green pulse, a machine breathing near her shoulder. Avery tried to open her eyes and discovered her body had become a country she no longer understood. Her throat burned. Her mouth was dry. Her ribs felt packed with glass. Something pulled at her arm. Something heavier pressed against her side. When she tried to move, pain rose so fast and bright that the room vanished at the edges. A hand closed gently around hers. "Do not fight the tube." The voice was Caleb's. She found him slowly. First, the outline of his shoulders, then his face. His beard was rougher than usual. His eyes were red. He wore surgical scrubs, but there was a dark stain near the cuff that looked old and washed badly. Avery tried to speak. Nothing came out. Caleb leaned closer. "You are in the ICU. Surgery went well. You have been out for a while. A while could mean anything in a hospital. Minutes, days, a life." Avery blinked once, then forced her eyes toward the door. Caleb understood too quickly. "The envelope is safe." Her eyes closed. The relief moved through her before the pain could stop it. Caleb kept his voice low. "Liam got it to hospital police. Agent Ellison has copies now. Voss is in custody." At the name, Avery's fingers tightened around his. Caleb looked toward the monitor, watching the numbers change. "He cannot reach you." Avery wanted to ask how sure he was. Instead, exhaustion pulled her under again. When she woke the second time, the breathing tube was gone, and her throat felt scraped raw. A nurse named Denise held ice chips to her lips with a plastic spoon. Small Denise said, "Do not get greedy." Avery swallowed one chip and coughed hard enough to regret being alive. Denise made a face. "That is the spirit." The ICU room was dim blinds half closed against the Arizona sun. A bouquet sat on the windowsill, still wrapped because flowers were not allowed near certain patients, but someone had brought them anyway. A folded card leaned against the vase. Avery could not read it from the bed. Caleb sat in the chair near the wall, asleep with his arms crossed and his chin tipped to his chest. He looked like a man who had promised himself he would only rest his eyes and lost the argument. Denise followed Avery's gaze. "He has left twice," she said. "Once to shower, once because I threatened to call security." Avery whispered, "He always dramatic." Denise smiled. "Only when people get shot in front of him." Memory returned in pieces. Yellow light. Locked doors. The gun. Liam on the floor reaching. The shot. Caleb's hands pressing into her side. The envelope sealed in plastic. Avery closed her eyes again, but the images waited there too. Denise touched her wrist. "You are safe in this room." Avery opened her eyes. The nurse did not say everything was safe. She was too good for that. Avery liked her at once. Later that afternoon, Special Agent Mara Ellison came in wearing a dark suit and the kind of calm that did not ask permission. She paused at the door until Avery nodded. Caleb woke when the door opened. Mara looked at him. "Dr. Mercer, Agent Ellison. You look terrible. So does your timing." Avery tried to laugh. It came out as a breath that turned into pain. Mara stepped closer to the bed. "I can keep this brief." Avery's voice was rough. "Did you get it?" "Yes?" The word was simple, but it changed the air in the room. Mara opened the folder under her arm and pulled out a clear evidence photograph. The tan envelope sat on a steel table marked, tagged, and flattened beneath bright forensic light. Original documents recovered from the trauma unit. Copies confirmed. Digital trail preserved. Liam Carter gave a statement within 20 minutes of the shooting. So did Dr. Mercer. Several staff members witnessed Voss demanding the bag. Avery stared at the photograph. A stupid thought came to her. The envelope looked smaller now. All that terror, and it was just paper. Mara continued. "We also secured the inventory logs before they could be altered. Your photograph from the copy shop matches vendor entries that were deleted from the hospital system after the lockdown started." Caleb sat forward. Deleted by whom? Mara looked at him, then back to Avery. Martin's cells logged into supply administration during the lockdown. He is now cooperating. Avery absorbed that quietly. What about Reeves? Mara's expression did not change. Colonel Reeves has retained counsel. Caleb muttered something under his breath. Avery asked, did she know? Mara did not answer right away. She knew enough to be afraid of records and not enough to stop the man making them disappear. That felt true in a way no legal sentence could. Avery looked toward the window. The blinds cut the sunlight into pale bars across the floor. And Voss, in federal custody, under guard. His attorneys are already framing the shooting as a stress reaction connected to administrative pressure and clinical exhaustion. Caleb's jaw tightened. He pointed a gun at a nurse in a trauma wing. They are not denying the gun, Mara said. They are trying to explain why the jury should see the man before the crime. Avery turned back to her. And the fraud. Mara pulled another sheet from the folder. Meridian orthotics was only the surface. The room went very still. Mara placed the page where Avery could see it. There were names in neat columns. Meridian orthotics and mobility. Canyon recovery access. Homefront surgical logistics. Pioneer limb systems. Desert Path behavioral care. Avery read them slowly. Each name sounded like a promise written by someone who knew exactly which words wounded families wanted to hear. Mara tapped the page once. Meridian, build prosthetics and mobility systems. Canyon, build outpatient therapy blocks. Homefront, build trauma supplies and surgical kits. Pioneer, build replacement components already covered by other contracts. Desert Path, build behavioral health sessions for patients who never attended them. Avery's throat tightened. Lucas Bell. Mara nodded. His name appears in 4 Desert Path claims after his death. The monitor beside Avery ticked faster. Caleb stood. That is enough for today. Avery did not look at him, no. Avery. Number. Mara watched her carefully. Avery forced the words through a throat that felt made of sand. How much? Mara slid the paper back into the folder. We are still counting. That bad. That organized. Avery looked down at her hands. They were bruised from IVs. A pulse oximeter clipped one finger. Her nails were clean, and that bothered her. She remembered blood beneath them. Her blood. Maybe Liam's, maybe no one's. The body kept score even when the record looked tidy. Mara softened her voice by a degree. These schemes worked because each theft was disguised as care already given. A patient was marked treated, so no one asked why they were still waiting. A kit was marked stocked, so no one asked why it was missing until a patient was bleeding. The paperwork did not just hide the crime. It replaced reality. Avery turned her head toward the card on the windowsill. Who sent the flowers? Caleb answered. Tessa. Denise retrieved the card and brought it to the bed. Avery opened it with fingers that did not fully obey her. The handwriting was sharp and slanted. You still owe me a hallway walk when I get my leg. Avery stared at it until the letters blurred. Mara gave her a moment. Then she said, I will need your formal statement when you are medically cleared. Avery nodded. Mara moved toward the door, then stopped. Miss Knox. Avery looked up. You were right to be afraid. The words landed harder than praise. Mara left without waiting for a response. The investigation became a living thing after that. Avery watched it from a hospital bed, then from a rehabilitation room, then from her apartment couch with a pillow braced against her side and a plastic medication cup on the table. She learned pieces of it from Mara, from Caleb, from the news from the silences people carried when they visited, and did not know how much she already knew. Federal agents entered Red Mesa before sunrise 3 days after the shooting. They did not storm the building. They arrived with warrants, calm faces, and boxes for records. They took procurement files, server backups, badge access logs, billing records, vendor contracts, and the hard drives from offices that had always smelled faintly of coffee and toner. Staff watched from hallways. Some looked shocked. Some looked relieved. Some looked at the floor. Martin's cells gave up passwords first, then names. He had not started the scheme, he said. He had only processed what came through. Then he had only adjusted dates. Then he had only reused signatures because Voss said the equipment had arrived and the files needed to match. Every only had led to another. The first fake receipt had frightened him. The 10th had become work. Colonel Reeves had signed urgent procurement exceptions without reading attachments, then later, with full knowledge that the attachments were wrong. Her attorneys called it command pressure. Mara called it willful blindness. Avery called it a door someone had chosen not to open because the noise behind it was inconvenient. The shell companies unfolded one by one. Meridian's bank account led to a holding company in Wyoming. That company paid consulting fees to a private account controlled by Voss's brother-in-law. Canyon Recovery Access rented a mailing address in Nevada and billed therapy sessions in neat bundles that matched federal reimbursement thresholds. Homefront Surgical Logistics existed on paper only, but its invoices carried delivery confirmations tied to old employee credentials. Pioneer Limb Systems shared an accountant with Meridian. Desert Path Behavioral Care had no licensed therapists on staff. Every name had a website. Every website had stock photographs. Every photograph had smiling people who had never set foot inside Red Mesa. Avery read the articles and felt a sickness deeper than pain. The public wanted one monster. A famous surgeon with a gun made that easy. But the fraud had moved through too many clean hands to belong to one man alone. 2 weeks after surgery, Avery was transferred from ICU to a private recovery room on the surgical floor. The move was supposed to feel like progress. It felt like exile. The room was quieter, the nurses busier, the distance from the trauma wing both comforting and unbearable. Caleb came every evening. Sometimes he brought food she could not eat. Sometimes he brought case updates he should not have shared but did. Sometimes he sat in silence and read medical journals while she pretended not to watch the door. One evening, rain, Mickey Scholl finally came to Tucson. It struck the window in hard silver lines and turned the parking lot lights into blurred halos. Avery lay on her side, breathing shallowly through a wave of pain when Tessa Monroe appeared in the doorway. She was in a wheelchair, wearing a red Mesa sweatshirt and one bright pink sock. Her hair was damp from the rain. A rehab aide hovered behind her, uncertain. Tessa looked at Avery. "Well, she said you look like hell." Avery whispered, "You dressed up." Tessa rolled in without waiting for permission. The aide retreated. For a moment, neither woman spoke. The rain filled the silence. Then Tessa said, "They told me you got shot because of the files." Avery looked at the blanket. "I got shot because Voss had a gun. That is not what I said." Avery closed her eyes briefly. Tessa moved closer to the bed. "Do not make my missing leg the reason you almost died." Avery looked at her then. Tessa's face was fierce, but her eyes were wet. "I am serious," Tessa said. "I need you to hear me. I am angry. I am furious. But I did not ask you to bleed for me." Avery's voice broke around the edges. "I know." "Good." Tessa wiped her cheek roughly. "Because when I get my prosthetic, I plan to complain about it like a normal person. Too tight. Too weird. Too ugly. Too expensive. I need you alive so I can be ungrateful properly." Avery laughed, and the laugh hurt so badly that she pressed a pillow against her ribs. Tessa waited until the pain passed. Then she reached into the side pocket of the wheelchair and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "My new fitting date," she said. Avery took it. This time, the appointment was real. Clinic location, prosthetist name, measurement session, confirmation number. Avery held the paper carefully. Tessa watched her. "Do not cry, I hate that." "I am not crying." "You are absolutely crying." Avery handed it back. Tessa tucked the paper away like it was fragile. At the door, she stopped. "When they ask me to testify, I am saying everything." Avery looked at her. "They already asked." Tessa nodded. "And I am bringing the sock." After she left, Avery lay awake for a long time. The hospital sounded different from a bed. Footsteps became guesses. Carts became warnings. Voices outside the door rose and fell without faces. She understood in a way she had not before how small patients became inside systems built by people standing up. Pain made time strange. So did media. The first headline appeared while she was still inpatient. Hero nurse shot after exposing military hospital fraud. Then came more. Whistleblower in scrubs. Decorated surgeon accused in Red Mesa scandal. Wounded soldiers denied care, while millions disappeared. Avery hated every version. The stories used old photographs from hospital events images where she stood in the background of trauma team awards she barely remembered attending. They called her brave, relentless, selfless. They did not mention the nights she could not sleep because the hallway replayed behind her eyes. They did not mention how she flinched when Denise dropped a metal basin. They did not mention the shame she felt when a nursing assistant helped her sit up and she almost cried from needing help. One morning, a television segment showed Voss, in dress uniform from years earlier, receiving an award overseas. The anchor spoke over the footage, a decorated military surgeon, a respected leader, a man colleagues described as brilliant, demanding, and deeply burdened by years of battlefield medicine. Avery stared at the screen. Caleb reached for the remote. "Leave it," she said. The segment cut to his attorney on courthouse steps. Dr. Voss dedicated his life to saving service members. The incident at Red Mesa was a tragic mental health crisis born from extreme institutional pressure. We ask the public not to rush to judgment based on incomplete information. Caleb turned off the television without asking again. The room went quiet. Avery said, "They are going to make him wounded." Caleb stood by the window with the remote in his hand. "Yes, they are going to make me the thing that pushed him too far." "Yes." She looked at him. "You knew. I suspected. And you did not say it. You were trying to breathe without tearing stitches. I prioritized." Avery looked toward the blank television screen and saw her own reflection there, pale and thin against the pillows. "He saved people," she said. Caleb did not answer. "He did. That is the part they will use because it is true." Caleb sat beside the bed. A true thing can still be used as a weapon. Avery folded her hands over the blanket. "I need every patient. Avery. I need every patient whose name they used. Every delay. Every false signature. Every family that called and got told the system said no. You need to heal. I am healing. You are plotting. That too." Caleb gave a tired smile, but it did not last. "Ellison is building it. I want to see what they have. You are a witness. I am also the person who noticed the first crack." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he took out his phone. "I am going to regret this. Probably." Mara arrived that evening with 2 binders and a warning. "You do not get to become an investigator from a hospital bed." Avery sat upright, exhausted by the effort and unwilling to show it. "I want to understand the case." "You understand enough." "No, I understand the pain. I want the map." Mara studied her. The agent had a way of being still that made other people reveal themselves. Avery knew the technique because she used it with patients who were lying about symptoms, medications, or fear. Finally, Mara placed 1 binder on the rolling table. "Names are redacted where necessary. You do not copy this. You do not photograph this. You do not contact anyone in this binder without clearance." "I understand. You say that like people usually do." Avery opened the binder. The map was worse than the pain. Patient after patient. A man billed for spinal bracing while still in an inpatient coma. A woman marked complete for 8 trauma therapy sessions she never received. A double amputee whose prosthetic components had been billed twice under 2 vendor names while his fitting was delayed for funding review. Nolan Briggs appeared under Homefront Surgical Logistics. The missing vascular shunt kits had been billed as delivered 4 days before his emergency. A receipt showed full trauma restock completed. Avery touched the page with 1 finger. He almost died because of a line item. Mara's voice was quiet, yes. That night Avery dreamed of cabinets. She opened one drawer after another, and each one was empty except for a patient bracelet. Tessa. Nolan. Lucas. Darius. Names printed in black ink. names stacked where supplies should have been. She woke gasping, one hand pressed to her side. Denise came in before Avery could call. "Look at me," the nurse said. Avery tried to sit up. "No, look at me." Avery obeyed. "You are in surgical recovery. Room 512. It is 3:18 in the morning. You are safe in this room. Breathe with me." Avery hated needing the words. She needed them anyway. By the time she was discharged, she had learned to walk slowly, sleep badly, and accept help with visible resentment. Caleb drove her home under a washed blue sky. Tucson looked too bright after hospital windows. The mountains sat clear and sharp in the distance. The city moved as if nothing had happened, which seemed both offensive and merciful. At her apartment, Caleb carried her bag upstairs despite her objections. Inside, everything was where she had left it. Coffee mug in the sink. Legal pad on the table. A sweater over the chair. Ordinary objects from a person who had walked out expecting to return with sore feet, not surgical scars. Avery stood in the living room, one hand on the back of the couch. Caleb watched her carefully. "I am fine," she said. "I did not ask." "You were about to." "No, I was about to tell you there is soup in the fridge, and you are not allowed to lift anything heavier than a mug." That sounds like asking with extra steps. He almost smiled. Then his phone buzzed. He checked the screen and his expression changed. "What?" He hesitated. Voss entered a plea of not guilty. Avery felt it, but not as surprise, as direction. She moved to the kitchen table and sat down slowly. The legal pad was still there, open to the first page of a fax she had written before everything turned violent. Her handwriting looked neat. Too neat. Missing vascular shunt kits listed as available. Tessa Monroe listed as fitted. Delivery signed by Elliot Kane, deceased 11 months. She touched the page. Caleb stood across from her. "You do not have to do anything today." Avery looked at the words until they steadied. Then she reached for a pen. Her hand shook once. She waited until it stopped. On a new page, she wrote the names she could remember. Tessa Monroe, Nolan Briggs, Lucas Bell, Darius Webb. Then she drew a line beneath them and left space for more. Caleb said nothing. Outside, rainwater from the storm still dripped from the balcony above, one slow drop at a time. Inside, Avery listened to it fall and began putting the broken pieces in order. The list of names grew slowly. At first, Avery wrote only the ones she could not stop seeing when she closed her eyes. Tessa Monroe, Nolan Briggs, Lucas Bell, Darius Webb. Then Mara brought more names, some redacted, some attached to affidavits, some carried in the voices of families who had waited too long for answers no one had planned to give them. Avery kept the legal pad on her kitchen table. Some mornings she could not look at it. Other mornings she woke before dawn, made coffee she barely drank, and sat with the pages until the sun reached the balcony rail. The city outside came alive in ordinary sounds. Cars starting. Dogs barking. Sprinklers ticking over dry grass. A delivery truck grinding into the complex. Life continued with a stubbornness that sometimes comforted her and sometimes made her furious. Her body healed by inches. The wound beneath her ribs became a raised line of tender skin. Her breath came easier. She learned which chairs hurt, which movements punished her, which memories arrived with no warning at all. A metal pan striking a counter could take her back to the corridor faster than any nightmare. The click of a badge reader could tighten her throat. Fluorescent lights in grocery stores made her leave full carts in the aisle and walk outside until she could feel the desert air. Caleb came by often, though he stopped acting like each visit was medical supervision. He brought groceries. He tightened the loose hinge on her kitchen cabinet. He pretended not to notice when she moved too slowly. She pretended not to notice when he watched her breathing. Mara came with documents, always documents, court notices, witness schedules, copies of indictments, motions filed by the defense, government summaries written in language so clean it nearly hid what had happened. Avery read every page. One afternoon, Mara placed a thick folder on the table and sat across from her. "Trial date is set. Avery looked at the folder, not at Mara. When? January 15th. Federal Courthouse in Phoenix. The words made the room smaller. Caleb, standing near the sink, turned off the faucet. Avery reached for her coffee. It had gone cold. Mara watched her hand. You do not have to decide how you feel about it today. I know how I feel. Tell me. Avery looked up then. I feel like a patient waiting for an incision. Mara nodded once as if that answer had weight, and she respected it. The defense has filed notice that they intend to challenge your perception during the shooting and your judgment leading up to it. Caleb set the dish towel down harder than necessary. Avery did not blink. They want to make me unstable. They want to make you human in a way that serves them. That is a polite way to say unstable. It is a courtroom. Polite words do a lot of dirty work. Avery opened the folder. The first page was a defense motion requesting access to her employment history, military service evaluations, trauma exposure records, and mental health treatment after the shooting. She read until the letters began to press together. Caleb came closer. They cannot be allowed to drag everything in. Mara said, the judge will limit some of it, not all. Avery touched the page with one finger. They are going to use the war. Mara did not soften the truth. They will try. They are going to say I saw a threat because I was trained to see threats. They will ask why you copied records, why you did not trust leadership, why you involved patients, why you did not leave the building when you felt unsafe. Avery closed the folder. Good. Caleb looked at her. Good. If they ask why I did not trust leadership, I get to answer. Mara leaned back slightly. For the first time that day, something like approval passed through her face. Then we prepare. Preparation became its own kind of therapy, although Avery would never have called it that. Mara brought her to a quiet federal office in Tucson where the lights were warmer than hospital lights, and the conference room had no windows. An assistant United States attorney named Daniel Cho sat with them for hours, building her testimony one careful layer at a time. Daniel was younger than Avery expected, with tired eyes and a voice that never rose. He spoke like a surgeon tying knots. Do not argue with defense counsel. I know. Do not fill silence because it feels awkward. I know. Listen to the question. Answer the question. Stop. Avery gave him a look. He smiled faintly. Every witness says they know. Then they get angry. I am already angry. That is why I'm saying it. They practiced the first day until her side ached. Daniel stood near the end of the table with a yellow pad. Ms. Knox, you had already decided Dr. Voss was guilty before any investigation began, correct? Number. What had you decided? That the records did not match the patients. Again. That the records did not match the patients. Again. By the fifth time, the sentence no longer felt defensive. It felt like a floor beneath her feet. Mara played the hallway footage only once before trial. She asked first. Avery said yes before she could change her mind. The video had no sound. That made it worse. Avery watched herself from above. Smaller than memory. A figure in navy scrubs at the nurse's station. Voss entering the corridor. Liam stepping back. The bag flying, the gun appearing, the first flash, the fall. Her own body becoming evidence. Caleb stood behind her chair and did not touch her, which she appreciated. If he had placed a hand on her shoulder, she might have broken apart. When the video ended, Mara closed the laptop. Avery stared at the black screen. I thought I stood longer. Daniel said gently, You stood long enough. She did not answer. The morning of the trial arrived cold and clear. Phoenix looked hard under winter light, all glass and stone and traffic moving in silver lines. The federal courthouse rose downtown with flags lifting in the wind. News vans waited along the curb. Reporters stood behind barriers with microphones tucked into their coats. Avery saw them through the tinted window of Mara's government vehicle and felt her pulse move into her throat. Caleb sat beside her in the back seat. You do not have to look at them, he said. I know. She looked anyway. People wanted a face for the story. The wounded nurse, the famous surgeon, the broken hospital. Faces made things easier to carry. Mara opened the door first. Daniel Cho waited near the courthouse steps with 2 federal officers. Avery stepped out carefully. Cold air struck her cheeks. Voices rose at once. "Miss Knox, are you ready to testify? Do you blame Red Mesa leadership? Do you believe Dr. Voss tried to kill you?" "Avery, over here." She kept walking. Her scar pulled beneath the dark blue suit Caleb had helped her choose because it hid the brace without making her look fragile. Each step up the courthouse stairs felt measured, witnessed, claimed. Inside, the noise dropped away. The courtroom was smaller than Avery expected. Not physically, but emotionally. After months of headlines, the room seemed almost plain. Wooden benches, seal above the judge's bench, flags on either side, jurors' chairs arranged in 2 rows, a court reporter setting up with quiet precision. Garrett Voss sat at the defense table in a gray suit. Without the white coat, he looked less like a legend and more like a man trying to remember how legends sit. His silver hair was trimmed, his posture was straight. His hands rested on the table as if awaiting a surgical instrument. He turned when Avery entered. Their eyes met. Nothing moved in his face. No remorse, no rage, no panic, only calculation. Avery looked away first, not because she was afraid, but because she refused to give him the satisfaction of becoming the room. The government began with records. Daniel Cho stood before the jury and spoke without theatrics. This case began with a missing surgical kit. It became a fraud investigation. It became a shooting because the defendant decided that the truth in a nurse's bag was more dangerous than the gun in his hand. He did not shout. He did not need to. The first witnesses were technical. Procurement analysts, bank examiners, digital forensic specialists, people with charts, transaction logs, and careful voices. They showed how Meridian Orthotics received payments for prosthetic systems never delivered. They showed how Homefront Surgical Logistics billed trauma equipment that never reached the supply rooms. They showed how Desert Path Behavioral Care charged therapy appointments for patients who were deployed, hospitalized, or dead. The defense objected often. Sometimes the judge sustained. More often, she did not. On the second day, Martin Sells testified. He looked smaller than Avery remembered. His rimless glasses slid down his nose. His hands shook each time he lifted a water cup. Daniel approached him with a document. "Mr. Sells, did you enter this delivery confirmation?" "Yes." "Was the equipment delivered?" "Number." "Why did you mark it delivered?" Sells looked toward the defense table and quickly away. "Dr. Voss told me the paperwork had to match the allocation." "What did that mean to you?" "That the money had already been moved." "Did you question it?" "At first, and then." Sells swallowed. "Then I stopped." The defense tore at him for nearly an hour. They called him a liar, a thief, a man trading testimony for leniency. Sells accepted all of it with the dull exhaustion of someone who had finally run out of doors. Avery did not pity him, not fully. But when he stepped down, she understood something she had not wanted to understand. Systems did not need monsters at every desk. Sometimes they needed one powerful man and a long line of frightened people willing to press enter. Tessa Monroe testified on the 3rd day. She entered the courtroom on a prosthetic leg. Avery saw it before anything else. Black carbon fiber. Careful gait. One hand near the rail but not gripping it. Her bright pink sock was visible above her shoe. The jury watched her cross the room. So did Voss. Tessa took the oath and sat upright in the witness chair. Daniel held up her rehabilitation record. "Sergeant Monroe, according to this record, you received an advanced prosthetic system on June 3rd. Did you receive it?" "Number." "According to this record, you completed an initial gait training session on June 4th. Did that happen?" "Number." "According to this record, you tolerated the session well. Is that accurate?" Tessa looked down at her prosthetic leg, then back at the jury. "I would have loved the chance to tolerate it." A few jurors shifted. Daniel let the silence breathe. "Were you asked to sign a form?" "Yes." "Did you understand the form would be used to close or delay your equipment claim?" "Number." "Why did you sign?" Tessa's mouth tightened. Because I was in pain and someone with a badge told me signing would help me get care. The defense approached gently at first. Sergeant Monroe, you were taking pain medication during this period, correct? Yes. And your memory may not be perfect. My memory is good enough to know whether I had a leg. The courtroom went silent. The defense attorney paused, then moved on. Avery looked down at her hands to hide the small smile she could not stop. Darius Webb testified after Tessa, then Lucas Bell's mother. Mrs. Bell wore a black dress and held her son's dog tags in one hand. Her voice was steady until Daniel asked about the appointment reminders. They called my son's phone, she said. I kept it active because I could not turn it off yet. The hospital left a message reminding him about therapy. She pressed the dog tags between both hands. He had been buried 9 days. Even the defense table lowered its eyes then. Voss did not. Liam Carter testified the next morning. His dress uniform looked too stiff on him, and his face had lost some of the boyish softness Avery remembered from the trauma wing. He walked to the stand with his jaw set, took the oath, and sat with both hands folded so tightly his knuckles whitened. Daniel asked about the missing vascular kits first. Liam explained the inventory screen, the empty drawers. Martin Sells asking him to change the note. Dr. Voss looking for Avery the night of the shooting. Then came the hallway. Where were you when Dr. Voss drew the weapon? Near the nurse's station. What did Miss Knox do? She moved between me and him. Did she have a weapon? Number. Did she threaten him? Number. Did Dr. Voss ask for something? Yes. What? The envelope. What was in the envelope? Documents, records, proof. The defense stood for cross-examination. Mr. Carter, you were terrified, correct? Yes. You had never been involved in a shooting before. Number. Your memory of events may have been affected by fear. Liam took a breath. Yes. The attorney stepped closer. So, when you say Ms. Knox moved between you and Dr. Voss, that could be your mind assigning heroism after the fact. Liam looked at Avery, only for a second. Then he looked back at the attorney. No, I remember the floor. The floor, yes. I was on it, reaching under the cabinet. I remember her shoes moving in front of me. Then I remember the shot. His voice shook, but he held it. She did not become brave later in my head. She was standing there when I was too scared to move. Avery felt her throat close. She did not look at Voss. She looked at Liam, who had once been afraid to restock trauma drawers without checking twice, and who now sat in a federal courtroom telling the truth with his whole body shaking. Avery testified on the 5th day. When Daniel called her name, the room seemed to narrow into a path from the bench to the witness stand. She rose slowly. Caleb was seated behind the prosecution table. Mara stood near the wall. Tessa sat in the gallery with one hand resting on her prosthetic knee. Avery took the oath. Her voice did not tremble. Daniel began gently. Please state your name for the record. Avery Knox. Your occupation? Trauma nurse. Former Air Force flight nurse. At the time of the incident, I worked at Red Mesa Joint Medical Center. He took her through the beginning. The missing vascular shunt kits. Nolan Briggs. Tessa Monroe's record. Elliot Kane's signature. Meridian's empty office. Voss's conversation. Mara's warning. The personnel note. The lockdown. Avery answered carefully. No speeches. No guesses. Only what she saw, heard, verified, and did. Daniel placed a photograph on the screen. Suite 214, dusty glass, paper lease sign. Did you take this photograph? Yes. Why? Because Meridian Orthotics had billed Red Mesa for equipment that patients had not received, and the listed office was empty. Did you know at that time where the money had gone? Number. What did you know? Avery looked at the jury. That the records did not match the patients. Daniel let the sentence stand. Then he played the hallway footage. The courtroom watched in silence. Avery did not watch the screen. She watched the jurors. One woman pressed her fingers against her mouth. A man in the front row leaned forward as Voss drew the gun. Another juror looked at Avery, then back to the video as if trying to fit the woman on the stand with the body falling on the screen. When the video ended, Daniel asked one final question. "Ms. Knox, why did you hide the envelope under the nurse's station?" Avery felt the old pain beneath her ribs, sharp as memory. "Because Dr. Voss could hurt me, but if the documents survived, he could not make the truth disappear." The defense attorney rose. He was polished, gray-haired, and careful with his sympathy. "Miss Knox, you have been through a terrible ordeal." "Yes. You have our respect for your service." Avery waited. "And your military service exposed you to trauma, correct?" "Yes. Your work as a flight nurse placed you in high-stress medical evacuations." "Yes. You have seen violence before." "Yes. You have been trained to identify threats quickly." "Yes." He walked a few steps, letting the jury follow him. "And sometimes that training can make a person hypervigilant." "It can." "You were tired when you began looking into these records." "Yes." "You were angry on behalf of patients." "Yes." "You did not trust your superiors." "Number." He turned back. "No, you did trust them." "No, I did not trust them. Because you believed they were corrupt. Because they were asking me to ignore what was in front of me." He picked up a document. "You copied patient records without authorization." "I copied evidence of fraudulent records connected to active patient harm." "That was not my question." "No," Avery said. "It was my answer." A faint sound moved through the gallery. The judge looked up, and the room went still. The defense attorney's smile thinned. "Miss Knox, did you want to bring down Dr. Voss?" Avery looked at Voss for the first time since taking the stand. He watched her with that same careful stillness. "Number." "You did not." "No. I wanted Tessa Monroe to receive the prosthetic listed in her chart. I wanted Nolan Briggs to have the surgical kit the inventory said was available. I wanted Lucas Bell's mother to stop getting calls for therapy sessions her son could not attend because he was dead." The attorney stepped closer. "Miss Knox, please answer the question." "I did." He tried again. "Did you consider that Dr. Voss, after decades of service, might have been overwhelmed by impossible pressures?" Avery held his gaze. "I considered that a lot of people in that hospital were under pressure. Most of them did not steal from patients. Most of them did not bring a gun to the trauma wing." The cross-examination lasted nearly 2 hours. By the end, her side burned and sweat chilled under her suit jacket. She did not show it until she stepped down and reached the prosecution table. Caleb rose as if to help her, then stopped himself. She gave him one look of gratitude for that restraint and sat down without assistance. Closing arguments came 2 days later. The defense spoke of service pressure complexity, administrative chaos, and a brilliant man broken by an institution that demanded miracles. They admitted Voss had failed. They admitted he had made terrible decisions. They asked the jury not to confuse tragedy with conspiracy, not to turn a decorated surgeon into a villain because a broken system needed a face to blame. Daniel Cho stood for the government with no notes in his hands. "Dr. Voss saved lives," he said. "That is true. It is also true that he stole from lives already broken. The law does not give a man credit for old courage so he can spend it on new harm." He walked toward the evidence screen. "The defense wants you to see pressure. Look instead at pattern. The same fake vendors, the same false receipts, the same patient files closed before care was given, the same money moving away from the wounded and toward people who knew how to hide it." He paused, and when Avery Knox found that pattern, Dr. Voss did not call an auditor. He did not call an administrator. He locked a trauma wing and demanded the envelope. Then he fired. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. Avery waited in a small room with Caleb, Mara, Daniel, and a silence that seemed to press against the walls. Nobody ate the sandwiches someone brought in. Nobody drank the coffee after the first cup. Caleb tried to read and turned the same page 6 times. When the marshal knocked, Avery knew before the door opened. The courtroom filled quickly. Voss stood when the jury entered. Avery watched his shoulders, not his face. The foreperson held the verdict form. Count 1, attempted murder, guilty. Count 2, assault with a firearm on federal property, guilty. Count 3, theft of federal health care funds, guilty. Count 4, wire fraud, guilty. Count 5, obstruction of justice, guilty. Count 6, conspiracy to defraud military medical programs, guilty. The words arrived one at a time, each one clean and final. Avery did not cry. Tessa did. Liam lowered his head into both hands. Caleb exhaled like he had been holding his breath for months. Voss did not turn around. At sentencing, the courtroom felt different, less electric, heavier. The public hunger for verdict had passed, leaving behind the weight of consequence. Patients gave statements. Tessa spoke first. "I did not lose my leg because of Dr. Voss," she said. "But he made me wait for the one that was supposed to help me live after losing it." Darius Webb spoke about missing therapy and learning to distrust every appointment reminder. Mrs. Bell spoke only for 3 minutes. She told the judge that each false claim made in her son's name had felt like someone using his grave as a billing address. Avery did not plan to speak. Then Daniel asked if she wanted to. She stood at the lectern with one hand resting lightly against her side. She looked at the judge, not Voss. "I do not know what sentence can repair a hospital hallway," she said. "I do not know what sentence gives patients back the months they lost waiting for care already marked complete. I only know that the paperwork looked calm while people suffered. That is why it worked for so long." She stepped back. The judge sentenced Garrett Voss to a long federal prison term. His medical license was revoked. His military honors remained in archives, but his name came down from the surgical wing. Martin Sells received a lesser sentence for cooperation. Colonel Reeves resigned before her administrative hearing concluded, and later pleaded guilty to making false statements to investigators. None of it fixed the hallway, but it changed the doors. Red Mesa Joint Medical Center did not transform overnight. No place built on command habit and reputation changes because a judge speaks. The first weeks were ugly. Staff meetings ran long. Administrators used careful words. Some employees avoided Avery's name as if it were contagious. Others sent messages she did not answer because gratitude from a distance was easier than accountability up close. Then the practical changes began. An independent reporting office opened in a former conference room near the chapel. Its director reported outside the hospital chain of command. Supply inventory for critical trauma equipment became visible to unit leads in real time. Prosthetic and rehabilitation delays triggered automatic patient advocate review. Vendor approvals required separate clinical and financial verification. No single physician could close a rehabilitation milestone without therapist confirmation and patient acknowledgement. The new system was imperfect. That made Avery trust it more than the old one, which had always pretended to be flawless. 6 months after the verdict, Avery returned to Red Mesa on a Monday morning. Not in scrubs, not as a patient. Her new badge read Director of Clinical Integrity and Patient Safety. She stood outside the main entrance for a long moment before going in. The desert light spread across the building. Flags snapped in the dry wind. Helicopters moved low over the city, their shadows sliding across the parking lot just as they always had. Above the doors, the same 3 words waited: duty, healing, honor. Avery looked at them without flinching. Then she walked inside. People noticed. Of course they did. A unit clerk stopped mid-sentence. A security guard straightened. A nurse from ICU gave her a small nod. 2 administrators near the elevator suddenly became very interested in a tablet. Avery kept walking. The trauma corridor had been repainted. The bullet hole was gone. The damaged wall panel had been replaced. The floor shone as brightly as it had the night she fell. For a moment, her breath tightened. Then she heard a familiar voice. "You going to stand there all day?" Tessa Monroe came down the hall with a smooth, deliberate stride. Her prosthetic made a faint mechanical sound Avery had come to love. She carried a paper coffee cup in each hand. Avery took one. "Hospital coffee. Do not insult me, I went across the street." They stood together outside Trauma 3. Tessa looked at the repaired wall. I thought it would feel different. Avery nodded. It does and it does not. Tessa sipped her coffee. Good, I hate simple endings. Avery smiled. Her office was small, tucked near the patient advocacy suite. No view of the mountains. No polished conference table. No award wall. Just a desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, and a window overlooking the chapel courtyard. On the desk sat a folded note. Avery opened it. Tessa's handwriting. I walked in today. Keep making noise. Avery placed the note inside the top drawer where she could reach it. The first complaint came at 10:42 a.m. A physical therapist reported a delayed mobility device that had been marked pending patient preference. This time, the record held until the patient advocate called the patient directly. The patient had never requested a delay. The vendor had entered the wrong code. It was corrected by noon. At 1:15 p.m., Liam Carter came to her office in a fresh uniform, older in the eyes and steadier in the shoulders. He stood in the doorway. Director Knox. Do not start. He smiled. I wanted you to know I filed the variance report on the new trauma kits. 1 missing seal. Probably nothing. Avery gestured to the chair. Show me. He did. They checked the report together. It was nothing, a torn outer package, replaced and documented. No fraud, no hidden scheme, no dead man's signature. Nothing had never felt so good. Late in the afternoon, when the sunlight in the chapel courtyard turned gold, a new nurse appeared at Avery's door. Her badge read Grace Holloway. She was young, maybe 25, with tired eyes and a medication chart clutched in both hands. I am sorry, Grace said. This might be nothing. Avery looked at the chart, then at the nurse's face. Those words again. This might be nothing. The small sentence people used when they were trying not to sound afraid. Avery set down her pen, closed the door. Grace did carefully. Avery pointed to the chair. Start from the beginning. Grace sat. Her hands stopped shaking once Avery began to listen. Outside the office, the hospital moved through its ordinary noise. Monitors, footsteps, elevator bells, distant laughter from a therapy room, wheels rolling over polished floors, a helicopter passing somewhere above the roof. Avery listened to the young nurse describe a dose that did not match the order a note entered under the wrong clinician, a patient too sedated to explain what had happened. She did not interrupt. She did not explain it away. She did not ask whether Grace was sure in a tone that punished uncertainty. She opened the chart, pulled the record forward, and placed a blank note sheet between them. Tell me exactly what you saw. Grace breathed in. Then she told her. The sky outside deepened toward evening. In the courtyard, the chapel windows turned blue with reflected light. The hospital kept breathing imperfect and alive, while one quiet report became visible before it could become a wound. Avery wrote the first line in the file. Concern raised by bedside nurse. She paused, then added the time. This time the record began where the truth did.